Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda Rose, and today I have a really exciting video for you all because I have been tagged by the amazing Too Cool for Middle School, and this entire tag is all about our process for becoming teachers. Now, what's really great about this idea is that Too Cool for Middle School is actually based in California, and then I'm here in New York. And so you're really gonna have an opportunity to get different perspectives and understand the process for different people in different states in the country. And so I just wanna say thank you to her for tagging me in this and giving me such a great opportunity. And I'm also just really excited to provide my insight and my perspective on this topic for all of you watching. So if you haven't already, you already know the deal. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, that you like this video, and also follow me on Instagram. I've really been slacking with telling you guys about my Instagram page, but make sure that you follow me. My name is Amanda Rose Life, and Rose has a 3 instead of an E at the end, but I'll definitely put it somewhere down here. Again, Amanda Rose Life on Instagram. And let's get right into this tag of how I became a teacher. Question number 1. Did you always know you wanted to be a teacher? If not, when did you decide to become a teacher? So I don't want to be corny, but I am one of those people who always knew that I wanted to be a teacher ever since I was in, I want to say, maybe 9th or 10th grade in high school. I just had always loved learning and always loved explaining things to people. I really grew up with my dad constantly reading me books about historical figures. So I was just always obsessed with reading and learning and always wanting to share those facts and information with the people that I knew around me. And so I just knew that that was kind of the channel. And then once I ended up becoming involved in my church and teaching classes at my church, that's when also I started to realize man, I really do have a passion for teaching, and so I want to make this into a career. Question number 2. What was your major in college? So for my undergrad, I majored in history. So that was my major, history, but then you're also able to choose a concentration. And so I decided to concentrate for specifically European history. So my degree is in history, but for my last year, I chose my concentration in European history. Again, I was just fascinated by things like kings and queens and all of the Italy and the gladiators and all of the shady behavior that would happen for people who desired power. And so that's really what just gripped me, and I was just fascinated by their lives. And so I decided to concentrate in European history, but I did major in history itself. Question number 3. What kinds of requirements does your state have for teachers? And did you have to do observation hours, student teaching, etc.? Yes, so the types of requirements when I became a teacher, and that was 9 years ago, so it may have changed, so I'll do the best to kind of explain what I know is certain. But the requirements were, yes, student teaching, specifically for social studies. My cohort, during that year, New York State is constantly changing requirements, and during that year they changed student teaching from 1 semester to 2 semesters. So I actually had to stay an additional semester in undergrad for a 2nd semester of student teaching hours, and I also had to do observation hours as well. I don't remember how many, but that was the first step into the process, was doing my observation hours, and then the second step was doing student teaching for 2 semesters. And the requirement, because my certificate is from 7 to 12, it was 1 semester in middle school, and then the other semester had to be in high school. So the reason why I enjoyed that so much, and I think that student teaching is so worth it, is because I got experience in both. I was doing US history 7th grade, and then I did 9th grade global history. And although they're only 2 years apart, there is a real major difference between middle school and high school. And that really did give me an opportunity to channel in and decide what grade I wanted to teach, or at least the area, and I knew that I definitely wanted to teach high school after that experience. Other things that I needed, of course, you needed your college degree. You needed at the time to take 3 different exams. I believe now they've extended it to 4. I'm not sure what the 4th one is, sorry, but if there is any information about New York State certification, I would definitely link that below in this video. But I remember having to take an exam about content. I remember having to take an exam about just like morals and ethics as a teacher, and there was definitely a 3rd exam that I remember I had to take as well. You also had to take seminars, things like bullying, which is a much more recent one that New York State has just mandated, and a bunch of other seminars for teacher training. So that's everything that I remember that was required to be a teacher. And of course, the pathway is different for people who are in programs like Teach for America, or if you are someone who's switching careers. My path is different because I literally went from high school straight to college to be a teacher, and so I was not a career changer. So my experience is gonna be a little different from people who chose to do education a little bit later in their life. Question number 4. How did you decide which age group, elementary or secondary, or subject you wanted to teach? So I answered this a little bit, but definitely I always knew I wanted to teach history. Actually, at first I thought I wanted to do English because I loved reading. It's all I did when I was a child. But then I started taking courses in college with English and I hated it. I was so turned off by this poetry course that I had, and then the grammar and literacy. Like, it was just things that I realized I like reading. I necessarily don't like English as a whole. And so that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna major in history because I love reading about history. And so I realized, okay, that's really what my passion is. I do love reading, but what I love reading about is what my passion is tied to. And so that's how I knew that I really wanted to teach history. And also, again, age group, I always had a passion for high school kids. If I'm being honest, I struggled a lot in high school with identity and also relationships and boys, and just made a lot of like really poor choices. And I always felt like I didn't have someone besides family that I can just reach out to that can help guide. And so that was what really sparked my desire for high school, because I remembered myself and just everything that I was going through, and I wanted to be a voice of reason for people who were in similar situations as me in high school. Question number 5. Did you do any substitute teaching? Yes. So I made the silly mistake of not applying for grad school right after I graduated with my undergrad, because I thought I was gonna get a job and I didn't want to be overwhelmed my first year as a teacher, and I didn't get hired. And so I just decided to apply for substitute teaching in October, and the school year had already started in September. I substitute taught from October literally up to June, so almost an entire school year. I substitute taught in a high school. It was actually the high school that I went to. It was really easy just to go in, speak to the assistant principal. You have to get nominated by a school leader. And then from there, you will get randomly called because you're not a permanent substitute teacher. And so you're on a list, and every morning you get called and you have to report to different schools. What I did was I built a relationship with my former high school, and so they would call me directly in the morning whenever they needed a substitute. And so very often I never had to report to random schools because I already had that direct relationship with my former high school, and that made a world of a difference. Some people may argue that going to other schools would have given me a lot more opportunity to see what was out there. But it was really hard to travel, especially here in the city, constantly going to Brooklyn, to the Bronx, to Queens, and then Queens and Brooklyn are so large. So it's just a lot easier to just know, hey, I'm gonna report to that school every morning. That's where I'm gonna go. I know what time I'm gonna get home. I know what the expectations are. I know the staff. And so it just became a lot easier building a relationship with that school. Number 6. What was the process like to apply for the first teaching job you were hired for? First step was submitting my resume online, which my resume was really scarce because I didn't have much experience, but I put as many things on there as possible. I did include my teaching experience at church, substitute teaching. I included the student teaching, anything at all that I knew I had gathered experience from teaching. I had done tutoring programs, so I had added that as well on my resume. And the first step after that was I was contacted by the HR department and was told that the principal wanted to do a phone interview. So the first step of that process was a phone interview. Then after the phone interview, the second step was an in-person interview. After that, it was a demo lesson. And then after that was actually getting hired. So there was a pretty long process when it came to getting hired at that school, which I'm sure is pretty standard. And I know that other schools even have a much more thorough and lengthy process. My school probably was fairly simple compared to other schools. I know that some schools now will ask you to upload video responses to questions before they ever even call you in person for the interview. And so every school has their own procedure and their own process, but that was the process for me with the school that I currently am at right now. Number 7, were there any common interview questions you remember? So I don't remember many, but for sure one of them was if I was bilingual, especially here in New York, because there's so many Spanish-speaking students that being bilingual is definitely a plus if you're going to get hired by a school here in the city. But unfortunately, I am not bilingual. Another very common question was classroom management strategies or skills. Another common question was, what is my favorite part of my content, or what am I most passionate about when it comes to my content? And a fourth one is, what are my assets, or how can I contribute to the school, and also a weakness that I believe that I have. And so those are the most common questions. And also when I sit in interviews at my school for people that are potentially going to get hired, those are also the questions that we ask as well. Number 8, what was the first teaching position you were hired for, whether it be grade level, subject, or etc.? So the first teaching position would be my substitute teaching, but the first position ever, and I speak about this my first year as a teacher, so I'll put like a card or something for that video here. But the first position was a leave replacement. So the teacher that I was replacing was going on maternity leave, and that was for U.S. history and participation in government. It was only supposed to be a 3-month position, and when that teacher came back, I was supposed to get fired, but I did not. The staff liked me so much that they created an alternative or a temporary position until June. And then in June, one of the social studies teachers ended up leaving, and the school offered me the full-time position. So that position was for U.S. history and participation in government, which, as I just mentioned earlier, was the exact opposite of what I had went to school for. I went to school for European history, and so that year, or those 3 months, were really difficult because I was having to invest so much time into learning content that I wasn't 100% familiar with, so that I could excel in those 3 months that I was covering for that teacher. Number 9, what did you feel prepared for on the very first day of your very first job, and what did you feel unprepared for? I'm not sure I felt prepared at all. I knew how to write a lesson, but that's pretty much it. I did not feel prepared at all, and I give a lot more details in my other video, again, my first year of teaching, because I didn't know the content, I didn't know the school. I was thrown in because the teacher had ended up going into labor earlier than expected, and so I didn't get an opportunity to conference with her, meet with her, find out what the kids were already up to. What I did know is that I wanted to build relationship with my students. That was the number one thing that I always had a passion for. And so I felt prepared in that aspect of being relational and really being open-minded to build relationship so that I could build respect. But other than that, I don't know how much I was prepared, especially once I started the job, because you don't know what to expect. And so definitely speaking with other staff members, reaching out to the principal, speaking to other people in your department is definitely a must, because I didn't really have a lot of preparation. I was young, I was only 22. And so there's only so much that school teaches you. And so I guess if you are getting hired for a position where it's directly related to the content that you learned in college, that's the number one thing that you're going to be prepared with, is like, you know, your content. But everything else is trial and error, learning your students, what works, what doesn't work, modifying worksheets and differentiating. All of those things you do have to learn with time, because you're learning the students, you're learning the environment of the school, you're learning the culture of your school. And so if there's anything you're going to be confident with, is your content. Everything else, I think you really do have to learn as the job continues. Last question, number 10. Do you have any last bit of advice for people who are on their journey to become a teacher? My advice would be not to give up. It is a difficult journey. There's probably going to be a lot of changes with requirements, with your college, with actually finding a job, learning how to juggle school and loans and working. It is a very long and tiring process, but it is worth it. It's such a rewarding job, and although you may not hear thank you every day, whether you have a positive experience in the classroom, whether the lesson went exactly the way you had planned it in your mind, like, those are all the things that just feel so worth it and so rewarding. And so my advice would be just not to give up, to follow your heart, to follow your passion. There will probably be teachers along the way that will discourage you from becoming a teacher, that will discourage you from pursuing your goal, because that's also what happened to me. When I was student teaching and when I was substituting, I had veteran teachers telling me to, like, abort mission, and that I was young enough to follow something else. And so not allowing other people's negativity to rub off on you, and really just following and pursuing what it is that you want to do and what you know you're called to do and what you know you're passionate about. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice. Other things would be ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to other teachers. Don't be afraid to seek help. All of those things are really necessary when you're finding out what it is you really want to do and what pathways you're supposed to take to pursue education. So that was everything for this How I Became a Teacher tag. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure that you like. Again, do not forget to subscribe and also follow me on Instagram, and I will see you all in the next video.